Hello the YouTube. Fairly kind of impromptu video here. I hope you can hear me through the wind. It's not too bad, but I think the microphone is fairly sensitive. I'll do my best to get this wrapped up before the rain. Obviously kind of blue sky to the back of me, grey sky to the front, and here I am stuck in the middle with you. Obviously it's been a long time. Firstly, hope everyone is doing as okay as possible in these kind of strange times that we're all living through for the last what feels like forever. So firstly, hope everyone is as well as possible. I'm aware that people have left many comments on previous videos, which I've seen over the last few days, and yeah, firstly I apologise for not getting back to them. I've kind of used this channel, posted videos in the past, and kind of forgotten about it, to be totally honest. So I am back to give a kind of bit more of an update on my present situation. And at some point, maybe soon, I will do a bit more of an update about what's been going on for me over the last few years, basically. It's going to be kind of pretty raw, I'm afraid. Probably, hopefully, one take. Probably no fancy editing, transitions, music. It might just be kind of me and the camera, and hopefully not too much wind and not too much rain. So I will try wrap this up before it rains. But yeah, it could be a bit of a lengthy one because there's quite a few things going on at the moment. So in this video I will mainly be talking about my present situation. So firstly, I'll be talking about why I need to come off Tysabri, or Natalizumab being the drug name, after 11 very successful years where I've had little disease activity in that time, and no relapses. Secondly, after that, I'll be talking about my possible treatment options that I've been told may be an option to switch to, and kind of request if anyone can shine a wee bit of light on those treatments. Thirdly, kind of overlap slightly, I'll be kind of talking about my concerns, questions and frustrations about the situation, and again hope that people might be able to offer a wee bit of advice. I'm trying to collect as much information as I can before making the choice, and I will explain a little bit more later about why that is particularly important to me. So yeah, at present a lot going on. Some pretty big decisions coming up, obviously, like the main one, the big one, being the change from Tysabri after over a successful decade on it. So my neurologist told me last September, so September of 2020, we're now in August of 2021. If you don't follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I think that's the main ones at least. If you don't follow me on those accounts, then you probably won't be aware of kind of what's been going on in terms of this. But my neurologist told me, like I said, in September, that he needs to withdraw me from Tysabri. As I became JC virus positive. Now, I'll firstly explain what the JC virus is. So the JC virus is the John Cunningham virus, which is a very, very common virus, which I think, if I remember rightly, is in around 70 to 80% of the general population. So pretty much everyone's got it. And it's one of these things that you don't know that you have. It just kind of lies dormant, doesn't do any damage as such. You generally can contract it during childhood. However, I must have contracted it sometime last year, obviously, as I said, completely unbeknownst to me. However, the problem is, if you are JC virus positive and you are on Tysabri, and perhaps maybe some other medications, but obviously Tysabri is the one I know about, the one I'm on, your risk of PML, drum roll please, which I think stands for progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. Now, I've either not added enough syllables to that, or I've added too many syllables, but let's just go with PML. Makes it easier. So PML is described, according to Google, as a very serious aggressive brain infection and a life-threatening medical emergency. So I've known all along that being on Tysabri there is a risk of PML. However, I have known that if I'm JC negative, the risk is fine, in my opinion, very low. So as I said, my neurologist wants to reluctantly wants to withdraw me from Tysabri. Obviously, as I said, I've been so successful, and he wouldn't want to do it unless he felt it was for safety reasons. But he obviously has concerns about changing my medication during COVID and the potential impact this would have on my immune system. Despite this, when I last spoke to him in March, I speak to him every 6 months, when I last spoke to him in March, he says, I have to tell you, this has to happen, you are too young to assume the risk of PML. So I'm like, kind of, fair enough. Yes, he is my neurologist, and obviously, yes, his job is to kind of help my MS and protect me from relapse, protect me from future disability, basically. However, his ultimate goal, and I guess everyone who's involved in healthcare and NHS and whatever, their ultimate goal is to protect life. And I know it's very morbid, but at the end of the day, if you get PML, you are dead, or as good as dead. So you can't really beat around the bush with that one. At the end of the day, it's game over. So he mentioned to me, one thing that he mentioned to me was another concern for him was my high JC virus antibody titer. It's probably not titter, but it's TITRE, so I'm going to guess it's titer, but yeah, could be others. My high JC virus antibody level, he told me was 2.43, and he told me that anything higher than 0.9 is not nice. So I kind of said, look, I know you probably can't give me an absolute individualized number for me, however, kind of, can you do your best? And he kind of said, my number has gone from approximately 1 in 11,000 when I was negative, and I'm like, yeah, fine with that. I can kind of take that risk. It's so slim. To around 1 in 75. Sorry, 1 in 75. And I'm like, oh, okay. However, that is for data for those who have been on Tysabri for 2 years, and as I've said probably thousands of times even already, I've done it for 11 and a half. So he almost implied, yeah, there's a kind of number here, there's data here. However, you also have a high antibody level, and you've been on it for a very long time. So maybe I was meant to read in between the lines there. However, obviously it's been over a decade since I've been medication shopping as such, and you can go on drug manufacturers' websites for all these medications, and obviously, our one's the best because it reduces relapse by 100%, and our one's the best because it's this and this and this, and obviously that the data and the numbers and how effective it is obviously important, and it's like up there with of course the most important things to consider when switching medications. However, I also want to hear the all the gory details from people on these drugs, or people who have simply just come off Tysabri. How has that gone? And I want to hear the how well people tolerate the drug, what their short-term side effects are like, what their long-term side effects are like, which I know can certainly be the case with some of them. They can have pretty severe long-term side effects. So yeah, I'm trying to collate as much information as I possibly can ahead of the switch, which, like I said, is going to happen soon. So, as I said, he told me about this in September, and in September, at the time, he offered me, subject to passing screening. You always have to go through screening, mainly blood tests. They check for things like HIV, for hepatitis, ABCD. They check for like varicella zoster, loads of stuff basically. They just take vials and vials of bloods, which I'm personally fine with. It's not a big deal to me. You might have to have a heart scan for certain medications, you might have to have a lung puncture, but generally he wanted to do a screening for me, and if I passed the screening, the two choices of medications that he gave me to switch to were fingolimod, that's the drug name, the brand name being Gilenya, which is a once a day oral tablet. The second option he gave me was Ocrevus, that's the drug name, the brand name being Ocrevus, which is a 6 monthly infusion. You start off with 2 half doses, 2 weeks apart, and then your next one is a full dose, and you have a full dose every 6 months in the hospital, of course, and an infusion. However, kind of frustratingly, obviously we all know during COVID there's no or very little face-to-face appointments. So I spoke to my nurse about a week later, who's usually obviously at the appointments with us when we're all in person. However, it was over the phone with my neurologist, so she wasn't involved. So I kind of gave her an update and said, here's what he said, and here's what he's put on the table, so to speak. And she said, well, fingolimod isn't actually available due to issues with cardiac monitoring. And I'm like, okay, right, it's annoying. I'm down from 2 to 1 in a week. But issues with cardiac monitoring sounded kind of plausible, so I was like, well, okay, fine, I'll not really look too much more into that, even though I did quite like what I initially read. I kind of parked it for a while. I'll elaborate a bit more on this shortly. So we kind of were obviously just gradually speaking back and forth a little bit here and there over Christmas, January time, just back and forth in the odd email, just to kind of update each other with how I am and stuff. And the kind of loose agreement that her and my neurologist had made was that at the time, at Christmas time, January time, was when there was news about vaccines coming out. So they kind of, the neurologist made the kind of decision, as long as I was happy, of course, to try and hold off the treatment change for as long as possible until I had 2 vaccines, and then make the change after that. And I think the reason for this is because, and I've found this out particularly since researching the new medications, is that sometimes it can be a little bit of a logistical challenge to be vaccinated while on these medications. You might have to do a lot of moving around, and sometimes, as I'm going to say a bit later, the vaccine may not be as effective. So yes, obviously he was taking a risk in terms of obviously keeping. The longer I'm on Tysabri, the more risk of PML and as I said, death I am. I'm at more risk of game over. However, I was also happy to kind of try and park this for a while, and I've got lots of other stuff going on, so I was actually quite happy with his. I was happy with his decision. So we spoke again in March, as I said, 6 months later. 6 months later from September, and this time his offer had to change to Ozanimod. That's the drug name. The brand name being Zeposia, which is a once-a-day tablet as well, as the same as fingolimod. Or the other option he gave me was still Ocrevus, as I said, the infusion. However, about a week later, I did the same again. I updated my nurse on what was spoken about, and she told me that Ozanimod wasn't available yet because nobody had met the reps. Now, absolutely not saying that's her fault, maybe not even the kind of local health board's fault, but it was annoying, the fact that I had spoken to the neurologist twice, and both times a week later my 2 options had been halved, and both times the remaining one was Ocrevus, which, not just saying it, I don't really like the sound of, which I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on soon. So I had my COVID vaccines in April and the end of June, so as predicted, my nurse contacted me me in July and kind of said, look, you've had 2 doses, there's kind of nothing stopping this change train now, so kind of let's get moving. And I kind of expressed my frustrations about what I just said about, you know, that I keep getting inaccurate information, and surely there must be more options on the table than just Ocrelizumab, because I kind of feel at the moment I'm being forced to go from Tysabri to Ocrelizumab, where I know there's, compared to when I was first diagnosed 16 years ago, there's an absolute world of treatments now for MS compared to back then. So I kind of said, look, you know, I'm not going to speak to him until September. It sounds very much like you're both wanting me to change before then. I don't feel comfortable with that. You know, I want to be able to ask the questions, and I want to be able to obviously find out what is actually on the table now, because things change so rapidly. You know, I appreciate things change so rapidly, especially during COVID. You know, what's safe to be offered now, what isn't safe to be offered, what's new on the market, what isn't, you know, what's maybe not so effective as we thought. So I said, you know, in an ideal world, is it possible for him to squeeze me into an earlier clinic, so I can discuss these before the treatment change, and 2, is it possible for you to email him or however you communicate with him to find out in advance of my appointment, whether it's earlier or whether it's September, find out my options, so that then I can research these options and basically formulate questions for when I see him, speak to him. So I actually kind of mainly got my wish in the fact that he's managed to squeeze me into a clinic at the end of August, which is the end of this month, August 2021, and I also got an idea of what may be offered. So this is where I am kind of hoping that people may be able to kind of tell me their experiences on these things, or even, as I said, ideally if you've come off Tysabri onto any of these, or even if you just come off Tysabri full stop, anything I'm sure will be very, very useful, and I'm happy to hear it. So the options that she thinks that my options may be Ocrelizumab, like I said, brand name Ocrevus, a B-cell depleter, the infusion, the one that I know is pretty much definitely on the table because that's already been offered twice. The second one, ozanimod, Zeposia, that's the daily oral tablet, the one that I was offered and then told wasn't available. Now appears that it may be an option again, that he may offer me this. The third one that may be offered is Cladribine. Cladribine is the drug name. The brand name is Mavenclad or Mavenclad. That is a kind of an induction therapy. So I think you take like, it depends on your weight, but I think you take 5 tablets at the start of a month, or 5 days of, I think, like I said, the tablets will depend on your weight, but 5 days of tablets at the start of the month. So basically, it's a chemotherapy drug. It wipes out your B cells and your T cells. You take 5 days at the start of a month. The following month you do the same. A year later you do 5 days at the start of a month, and the same at the start of the next month. And I will explain a little bit more about this later when I talk about Lemtrada or Natalizumab. But the theory is that it kind of retrains your immune system slightly. As I said, I'll touch on that try and do it the best as I can in a bit more detail in my completely non-medically qualified position, by the way, just what I know or what I've read. Hopefully it's accurate. I'm sure it's pretty much spot on. But so Mavenclad may be an option. Again, this was actually one that I was told a couple of months ago we can't really use it at present due to COVID, but it appears to be back on the table. So, you know, as I said, appreciate things can't be used during COVID, especially with how impactful these are on your immune system. However, this one appears that it may be an option, so it's one I'm going to look into, and again, happy to hear anything you have on that. And the fourth, I think that's right, the fourth option that may be on the table is Ofatumumab. Ofatumumab is the drug name, the brand name being Kesimpta. That is a self-injection. which I've had problems with self-injection in the past. I've had problems with doing Rebif and Avonex to myself, so not too sure about this one. But it's basically a monthly injection, which I quite like the sound of a monthly injection. That's not too bad. So you actually have 3 loading doses beforehand each week. So week 1 you have an injection, week 2 injection, week 3 injection, and then following that it's month 1, month 2, month 3, blah 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 blah. And that is kind of like Ocrevus in the fact that Ocrelizumab, sorry, that is a B-cell depletion therapy, and the theory of you having your 3 loading doses is that it drops your B cells very, very quickly. I actually saw there's an American neurologist called Dr. Brandon Bieber, who on one of his videos, I will try and link anything I kind of talk about here where I'm talking about what someone else has said. I will do my best to link it in the description. But he posted on one of his videos, I'll try and find it as I said, he posted a quite kind of scary video in some ways where it shows, I can't actually see the screen by the way, all I can see is a camera, so if I'm putting my finger somewhere, it could look very, very stupid if I'm completely off screen, so I'm kind of having to guess. It's me and a GoPro. So your B cells will just drop like that and then be remained very, very low. So if your x-axis on the graph is weeks, it shows that your B cells just drop and then you keep them as low as possible. And I'll kind of explain a little bit more later about what the theory behind B cell depletion therapy is, or what I believe, or what I have kind of hopefully figured out is the reasoning behind, or the mechanism behind these therapies. I'll touch on that later. I again asked about Fingolimod, you know, the one that I was told issues with cardiac monitoring. I just wanted to kind of find out if that one could be an option as well. I need to breathe here because this one angers me a little bit, maybe quite a bit more than a little bit. So I was told that Fingolimod is definitely not an option because they can't get cardiac monitoring in the hospital as the hospital is so busy. Right, I hope I said this before, but Fingolimod is a tablet, okay? Obviously meaning you can take this tablet at home and you don't need to use hospital time. However, for your first dose of Fingolimod, you have to be in the hospital on, I think it's either 6 or 8 hour cardiac monitoring, because basically Fingolimod can affect your heart, perhaps even maybe just lower your heart rate very low, and if you do feel unwell, then obviously you're in the best place to be unwell, being in a hospital. You have to have a heart scan first before you even qualify for Fingolimod, just to check that everything is hunky-dory. But obviously, if you get through that 6 hour, 8 hour cardiac monitoring and you are fine, and there's no issues, then you can take day 2, day 3, day 4, blah 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 blah, all the way up to maybe year 11 and a half, like I've done for Tysabri. You can take it at home and not be using hospital time, resources and stuff. So, you know, if you kind of compare it to how much time, resources, space I've taken up in the hospital on Tysabri, for example, in the last couple of years I've switched to 6 weekly Tysabri. However, in the most for the most time that I've been on, for the vast majority of time I've been on Tysabri, I've done it 4 weekly. So I've done it 4 weekly, let's say, for 11.5 years, at 3 to 4 hours a time. You know, that adds up to, I'm not going to do the maths of course, but that adds up to a heck of a lot of time, space, resources in the hospital. So to be denied potentially another 11 years of treatment because I can't have 6 hours, really, really pisses me off. Excuse the language, but yeah, really, really hacks me off. And to me, living up here in the beautiful Scottish Highlands, it kind of is a bit of a bee in my bonnet, really, to be honest, about things not being quite so readily available as they might be in other places of the country. You know, if I was in Aberdeen, if I was in Edinburgh, if I was in Glasgow, if I was in London, if I was in Liverpool, and I was going on to Fingolimod, I may well be able to have it. I'm going to move on because I'm it annoys me, because I can't remember if I said this earlier, but I actually do quite like the sound of fingolimod. I had a brief look when I was, for that short period of time when I was offered it, and I did have another look early in the year, and I quite like the sound of it. So I'm kind of sad, angry, disappointed, frustrated. Anyway, I'll move on. So, in terms of Ocrelizumab, I'm probably always going to use the word Ocrelizumab because that's the one I definitely know is on the table. You could swap the word Ocrelizumab for Ozanimod, for Ofatumumab, for Mavenclad. I think that was the ones. So if I say Ocrelizumab, as I said, switch it for some of the other ones. My concerns basically are as follows. My concerns are the side effect profile of Ocrelizumab, especially with regards to infections. As I said, Ocrelizumab and some of the others are like a B-cell depletion therapy, which is a different way of working to Tysabri. I'll do my best. As I said, I'm not medically qualified, but I'll do my best to explain or how I find it out. The best person who I've found, by the way, to explain this is an American neurologist who's on YouTube, also on Twitter, called Dr. Aaron Boster, who I will try and link in the video in the description, who has been extremely one of a few neurologists who I'm going to plug, who have been extremely helpful for me in trying to kind of navigate this minefield of kind of change and what's right. However, Tysabri kind of works at the moment for me like the kind of Great Wall of China, in the fact that it stops basically naughty immune cells from crossing the blood-brain barrier, where obviously they would enter the blood-brain barrier and cause damage. So it kind of works as reinforces, like bouncers, works and reinforces that blood-brain barrier and kind of protects things a little bit more, if you like. So like currently my lymphocytes are actually higher than normal. I get a blood test every 6 weeks before my 6-weekly Tysabri infusion, and my lymphocytes are actually kind of higher than normal level at the moment. Whereas obviously with a B-cell depletion therapy, my B cells will be rapidly decreased to effectively none or very, very low. And that kind of feels to me like a constant infection risk, and I know infections are one of the most talked about things on Ocrelizumab, or maybe other B-cell depleters as well. And I'll explain particularly why infections, or to avoiding infections, is particularly kind of important to me. I'll explain that in a few minutes, but sort of my kind of understanding is the theory behind these B-cell depleters, like Ocrelizumab, like Ofatumumab, and maybe some of the others. So in your immune system, your lymphocytes, you have B cells, T cells, and natural killer cells. And my understanding is it's mainly the T cells that do the damage in MS. However, for a T cell to do the damage, it needs to be kind of, I think again, Aaron Boster, I think the word he used was co-stimulated. A T cell needs to be co-stimulated by a B cell, basically needs to be riled up by a B cell to go on and cause this damage. So obviously the theory is you deplete your B cells, that means the T cells are like, hey, I'm going to a fight, who's coming? And there's no one there to kind of, get them in top gear as such. But obviously I've never done a B-cell depletion therapy before, and as I said, infection, B-cell depletion just doesn't really sit well with me for some reason, and I'm going to elaborate a bit more on this as I go on. Another concern about Ocrelizumab and the others is the ability to have future COVID vaccines, and how they can be taken once treatment has begun. As I said, the reason for the delay in my treatment change was to have my vaccines while on Tysabri, because as I touched on before, they can be a bit more of a challenge once you're on certain medications. I also saw, again, another excellent person who's helped me kind of get as much information as I can, is another American neurologist called Dr. Brandon Bieber, who is also on YouTube, like Aaron Boster, also on YouTube and also on Twitter and perhaps other places. he put a tweet out. He posted a tweet the other day about people on anti-CD20 drugs, basically B-cell depletion drugs. So like rituximab, which I'm not offered, which is fine. Ocrelizumab, ofatumumab, are 80% less likely to have antibodies. Dr. Gavin Giovannoni, I don't suppose you'll ever watch this, but I'm very sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong. Who is I think he is the Barts School of Neurology lead or something like that, but he's one of the top neurologists, certainly in the UK at least, as far as I know. A reliable source as far as I'm concerned. He also mentioned this, and I'll mention that a wee bit again later. I've also came across experiences of patients on these B-cell depletion therapies who have tested negative for COVID antibodies despite being double jabbed or double vaccinated. So that is a concern. Again, I'm going to touch a wee bit more on why that's a concern in a second. Another thing that concerns me about ocrelizumab, certainly, is the requirement to have other medications alongside of it. So what I mean by that is when, as I said, ocrelizumab is a 6-monthly infusion. However, when you go for your 6-monthly ocrelizumab, before you have the actual drug, you have to be given pre-meds, so like an intravenous round of steroids, an intravenous round of antihistamines, I think anti-fever medications, and there's something else, I think it's somewhere in the air. I can't quite seem to bring it into the mind, but certainly steroids, antihistamines, and like I said, pretty sure anti-fever medications. And my concern about their side effect profile, not just ocrelizumab, but the side effect profiles of these other medications that I needed. I quite like the fact that Tysabri, for me at least, has only ever been Tysabri. I've not needed to have pre-meds. I've not needed to have pre-meds or steroids or anything. However, I'm pretty sure that I don't even think it's possible to have ocrelizumab without having these pre-meds. Now, this is a bit of perhaps a strange one. The reason why I've always been quite keen to keep my medications as low as possible. I think that's a perfectly sensible thing to do. However, I've been particularly mindful of my medication intake in the last 4 months, because pretty much 4 months ago yesterday perhaps, I developed tinnitus, which is has been a big issue for me, and actually is day to day a very big issue for me. However, certainly in the early days it was very, very distressing, and I was actually put on to Valium because I really could not cope. I was missing music is a massive thing for me, love it, and I was missing music, and it's very reactive to sound and stuff. So anyway, I was put on Valium, and it spiked my tinnitus quite considerably, and it's never came back down to what it was before that. Now, I've also had spikes for tinnitus for loads of things, different foods, different sound, of course, spikes it. Tysabri has also spiked it, but thankfully, touch wood, it's only kind of spiked it for like 7 to 10 days, and it's gone back down to baseline. But as I said, baseline is the Valium baseline, not my original baseline. So I'm kind of I tiptoe around medications a little bit, and I like to just keep them as low as possible, which, as I said, is sensible anyway, in my opinion. But it's a particularly important for me for that reason. Another concern about ocrelizumab, and as I said, the others, is I've said this a few times, it's about infections, but it's my ability to continue to work in a very busy environment. I work in a secondary school, so obviously I work alongside a lot of sniffling teenagers and a lot of sniffling adults, and basically how that is going to be possible once my B cells have been depleted, and therefore my risk of infection is higher. I'm not necessarily just talking COVID, I'm talking just infections in general, because obviously a minor infection could domino into something quite a bit more severe. So yeah, that is a concern. I don't expect you to necessarily work in a school, but if you have anything to say about you continue to work in a busy office or whatever, then I would be or if you took any precautions in particular, then I'm again very happy to hear. Very happy to hear from you. One that's probably a little bit of a niche one. I think niche is the right word. Is how good are these medications at slowing brain atrophy? I mean, I've found on the medication on the medication websites that they don't really talk about this too much. But it's one that my neurologist has always kind of spoken to me about. As I said, I've been speaking to him on the phone for the last few months, so I've not seen my scans in person. But when I used to see him in person, he used to say, "Right, Stuart, here's your most recent MRI scan," and then he would compare it to my previous one and kind of say, "Your brain hasn't shrunk too much," and I'm like, "Woohoo!" Excuse me, and we're back. Apologies for that rude interruption. I'll try and hopefully remember where I was. So yeah, it was my neurologist kind of comparing my brain with my previous brain scan and talk about brain atrophy. So basically everyone's brain will shrink during their life. Don't think, as far as I'm aware, don't think there's any possible way of avoiding that. However, the MS patient's brain shrinks at a faster rate than the average person. So he is always wanting to protect my brain volume, basically. So, as I said, we might not know too much about this one, but how good are these at protecting brain atrophy? And a final kind of concern is it's actually one thing I saw last night. Again, I mentioned him earlier, Dr. Gavin Giovanni. Again, apologies if that's the wrong pronunciation. He put something on Twitter last night about concerns about switching from Tysabri to anti-CD20 meds, so B-cell depletion therapies like, Ocrevus, ofatumumab, etc. So I read an article from him last night, and obviously he's an excellent source, like Aaron Boster, like Dr. Brandon Bieber, and he stated in his article that he posted, which again I will try and link at the bottom, he says, "In my experience, most patients tolerate anti-CD20 therapy, so for example rituximab, ocrelizumab, ofatumumab, relatively well, with the exception of Tysabri switches. Several of my patients who have switched from Natalizumab," that's the drug name of Tysabri, several of my patients who have switched from Natalizumab to ocrelizumab experience recurrent brain fog and fatigue. It suggests that some of the brain fog people with MS complain about after stopping Natalizumab must be driven by inflammation in the central nervous system and presumably by the trafficking of T cells and innate immune cells back into the brain and spinal cord. This is a form of sickness behaviour, which are the symptoms and behavioural responses that are hardwired to help us survive infections. In some cases, these have been so bad that patients have requested to go back onto Natalizumab, Tysabri, despite the risk of PML. So yeah, that's another factor in the move from Tysabri and the potential move on to a anti-CD20 B-cell depletion therapy. So I think that's the end of kind of my specific concerns about ocrelizumab and the others. So any contributions, I'll, as I said 1,000 times, I'll be extremely grateful for. One other medication that I'm increasingly interested in, and I like the sound of, but also find it absolutely terrifying, if that's possible to have in the same sentence, to find something that looks good but also looks bad, is one called Lemtrada. So Lemtrada is the drug name, the brand name is Lemtrada. So that is again, like Mavenclad, is like an induction therapy in that it basically wipes out your immune system, your B cells and your T cells. You have it in the hospital for 5 days a week, 5 consecutive days in year 1. Then you go back a year later for year 2 for 3 consecutive days. And the theory behind that is that it, again, I can't see the screen, so if my hands are off camera, this will look very silly. But basically, in MS, you have inflammatory cells, or in anyone's immune system, I think, you have inflammatory cells and you have regulatory cells. And in the MS patient, the balance of inflammatory cells to regulatory cells is way kind of out of balance. You obviously have much more inflammatory cells than you do regulatory cells. So the theory that I understand, as I said 1,000 times in my non-medically qualified language, is that you drop them both. You know, you kind of almost wipe out your immune system. And the theory is that when these cells, B cells, T cells, whatever, when they regenerate, they hopefully regenerate in a bit more of alignment. You know, you might have hopefully less inflammatory cells, more regulatory cells and things, so just a little bit more imbalance. Obviously you're not cured, and you won't help previous damage, but the theory is that you're inducing a change in the immune system, and I kind of quite like the sound of this. However, like anything, with something with the biggest benefit generally comes with the biggest risk, and I'll kind of explain my kind of concerns about that. It's one that I have actually asked my nurse about this quite a lot, and I think she's probably fed up of me, and I completely understand. She's told me there's been patients who have had pretty severe side effects, so we probably won't use this drug much now unless it's absolutely needed. You know, reasons like that I can perfectly kind of accept. It's other things like we can't give you cardiac monitoring that the hospital's too busy, that I can't really accept. You know, I've also seen, you know, both sides of Lemtrada. People who have had great benefit, people who really have had very bad kind of problems from it. You know, anyway, I don't think I'm allowed it, but it's one I'm wondering whether I can really put my foot down for. You know, the way I kind of see many MS medications, and this is perfectly fine. I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong, because this is actually exactly what I've done for my whole life with Rebif, with Avenex, and now with Tysabri. But the way I kind of see this, these are kind of like, they feel like firefighting, and firefighting is perfectly fine. But you know, I go in for my Tysabri every 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and it kind of like, let's just stop it. I go in the same, let's just kind of try and stop it, let's just stop it. And obviously, for some people that's perfectly fine, and I don't know if I'm at the stage of my kind of journey to try and take a bit more of a, you know, potentially more of a gamble, but hopefully for more of a permanent solution. I mean, as I've said, it's a serious commitment. You know, it has serious risks. I think over 50% experience thyroid problems, Graves' disease, Hashimoto's, people with kidney problems, with obviously infections, particularly while your immune system is kind of wiped out, so to speak. And I'm just wondering, as I said, if I'm at the stage where I want to effectively kind of go on the attack rather than almost go on the defence, or and I almost feel like I'm kind of running at the moment, and I don't know if I almost want to try and hit it head on, but it's whether I'm willing to take those obviously huge risks, and whether I can put my foot down to say, look, I'm willing to take those risks. I know you're telling me that it's not safe, but I believe from what I've read and other patients' experience, I believe it's right for me. So if anyone has an experience on Lemtrada, as I said, I've seen both sides, but if you can contribute any more, I would appreciate it. So about Tysabri, about coming off Tysabri, you know, there might be people who are thinking, look, right, you're on Tysabri, you've now got a very high risk of PML. PML would kill you. Why don't you just come off? I mean, yeah, obviously that would seem a very straightforward thing to do. However, you know, as I've said before earlier about coming off Tysabri, I mentioned the Dr. Gavin Giovanni source, but there's other well-established data online that I've known about for a long time. Talk about the rebound effect for Tysabri. So, excuse me while I kind of quote a little bit here, but there's many articles online, but including mention of catastrophic outcome of patients with a rebound after Natalizumab Tysabri treatment discontinuation. After stopping Tysabri, disease activity may return to pre-treatment levels, or a severe rebound with a marked clinical and radiological worsening could be seen. This starts the process of immune reconstitution, the immune system trying to return to its previous state of wreaking havoc on the body. With Tysabri, this generally happens around 3 to 4 months after not having a dose. It generally affects those who have done really well on Tysabri. And a 2014 study concluded that interrupting Tysabri therapy was linked to a nearly 2-fold increase in the risk of relapse. A quarter of participants also had more relapses after stopping Tysabri than before treatment was started. So, as I said about Tysabri earlier, you're effectively removing that barrier that I mentioned earlier, which I guess can enable these immune cells all to come flooding back into the brain. Once they've kind of after about 3 to 4 months, they can just there's no bouncers on the door basically, and they can all just get back in and kind of cause havoc. And you obviously hope that your new medication can protect you from that. But it's just another concern about coming off Tysabri in itself. As I said earlier, perhaps one day I will do a bit more of an update about the last few years, but just kind of briefly, I've been dealing with some really quite debilitating health issues, mainly since kind of 2013-14, and things have pretty much just dominoed a lot. And obviously, in my opinion, and in my neurologist, most importantly's opinion, these don't appear to be MS related. As I said, there's been very little progression on any MRI scan, or certainly nothing whatsoever to cause the volume of symptoms that I've had. We believe they are caused by failed medical procedures that I had in 2013 and 2014, and they are a big reason why I'm trying to formulate as much information as I can, because I regret hugely every single day agreeing to surgical procedures before. So I want to know as much as I possibly can. I want to know that when I make this decision, if I have a decision to make, if it goes wrong, I can hopefully put my hand up and say, as easy to say now, I can hopefully put my hand up and say, you did all your homework, yes, it went wrong, but you couldn't have done more, because as I said, those were the biggest mistakes. If I make the wrong decision, it would be the biggest mistake of my life. But hopefully this time, unlike my previous decisions with agreeing to surgical stuff, I can hopefully, as best as possible, say, yes, it went wrong, but you did all you can. So that's why I'm trying to source as much as I possibly can, and I don't think that's particularly a bad thing. It's just it's very unsettling, and I've obviously not had to think about treatment change for over a decade, and I find change extremely challenging, especially when it comes to health. And I always want to know what life is like on the other side of a decision, whether that's the other side of having a cup of coffee, or whether that's the other side of coming off Tysabri, because with my health, I can't afford to make another wrong choice like I have done a few years ago. So, living up here in, as I said, the beautiful, still not quite raining yet, Scottish Highlands. There's not many of these kind of like support groups and stuff as such. So you kind of can feel a little bit lonely up here. Hence why it's good that I have people like you who comment on things and are able to help me out. It's hugely appreciated. So if you have anything you can contribute, even if you don't think it's important, please just drop it in the comments. I will be very, very grateful, and this time, as I touched on before, I'll make sure I come back and actually remember that this account exists. But I'm getting a little bit tired. My backside is getting a little bit pins and needles. It's cold, and I keep saying it, it's going to rain. I'm amazed it hasn't. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you ever so much for everything. And yeah, my head's a little bit mince. I'm tired. This has been, I don't know how long it's been. I can't even see a timer on this, as I said. So yeah, take care of yourselves in this strange world, and I will speak to you all soon. Thanks very much in advance.